What good is a video game without any gamers? Just ask the creators of these titles, whose initial successes made way for dramatic drops in player count. The back of the box, if it existed, would make Marvel Rivals sound like a superhero fan's dream come true. The multiplayer hero shooter pits teams of famous Marvel characters against each other in fast-paced battles that could be ripped from the pages of a comic book. Marvel Rivals debuted in December 2024, and at the time it really felt like a breath of fresh air. Players poured in by the hundreds of thousands, and fans pointed to the game as an example of the free-to-play model done right. But as is the case with nearly every live service game, all that excitement wore off in just a few months. Marvel Rivals lost nearly 80% of its players by May 2025. The game hit its peak concurrent player count of over 644,000 shortly after its release, but it was clear by summertime that only about a quarter of those players would be sticking around for the long haul. Marvel Rivals started out as a game with mass appeal, but even though the majority of the players are gone now, the ones who remain are dedicated fans.
In the end, all will kneel before doom.
MechaBreak did a speedrun through the free-to-play life cycle. Amazing Season Games released its third-person mech combat game on July 1st, 2025, and over 130,000 gamers showed up to see what all the fuss was about. In an ideal world, gamers would have found the next Armored Core 6 waiting for them, but most players didn't think that was the case. MechaBreak lost 70% of its players in 13 days, and the game never recovered. There were two major problems plaguing MechaBreak when it first launched, and one of them was arguably easier to address than the other. Plenty of PC gamers had performance problems with the game, and they weren't shy about making their complaints known in their Steam reviews. Some players were also chafed by the monetization in MechaBreak. Even though the developers made the paid content cosmetic only, the game still took a hit for offering $30 skins in its store. Shortly after its debut, MechaBreak dropped down to mixed review status on Steam, and it didn't bounce back. There's a ridiculous amount of competition in the free-to-play space, and with the negative reviews haunting MechaBreak, the game couldn't pull in new players. The Monster Hunter series has been around for a long time, and it's hard to overstate how excited fans were about 2025's Monster Hunter Wilds. The previous mainline game, Monster Hunter World, was a massive success, and players charged into Wilds ready for a new adventure. At release, the game peaked at more than 1.3 million players on Steam alone, but players started leaving the game in droves almost immediately. Less than 6 months after the release of Wilds, it had lost 98% of its players, and there weren't any signs that they'll be coming back anytime soon.
It looks like it was just left here. Like someone abandoned it while they were in a hurry.
What's happened to Monster Hunter Wilds has been the subject of many debates online. Many agree that, in an attempt to appeal to a wider audience, Wilds simplified the Monster Hunter formula a bit too much. The series is known for having gratuitously detailed systems that are somewhat opaque to newcomers, and hardcore fans think the streamlining in Wilds simply went too far in the other direction. The reviews on Steam exposed another side of the Wilds story. Simply put, the reviews were bad, and the game's optimization on PC was the main culprit. Plenty of reviewers commented on the installment's simplified gameplay systems, but the overwhelming amount of the negative reviews on Steam called out the game's poor performance. This could mean that there are still plenty of Wilds player numbers on other platforms, which are less open to sharing data, but that still wouldn't make Wilds a victory for the franchise. Single-player games are almost guaranteed to lose players faster than multiplayer games, but even by that standard, the decline of Avowed stands out. Obsidian is the legendary developer behind Fallout New Vegas, and gamers were optimistic for the studio to take on a sweeping fantasy RPG. Avowed launched in February 2025, debuting to mixed reviews all around. Unfortunately, the gameplay and storytelling didn't offer many surprises to fans of the genre, or anyone who's played an Elder Scrolls game before.
People don't like you very much, do they?
Partly due to those lackluster reviews, the player count for Avowed on Steam never managed to impress. The game peaked at just under 20,000 concurrent players shortly after launch, but within 6 months, fewer than 400 people were playing the game each day, a 98% drop. For comparison, Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2 launched in the same month as Avowed and lost only 49% of its players in that same amount of time. As of August 2025, more people were playing Obsidian's previous game, The Outer Worlds, than Avowed. Schedule 1 has all the hallmarks of a flavor of the week game, which is actually part of its appeal. The premise is simple. You and your friends are trying to become the drug kingpins in the small town of Highland Point. That means creating labs, hiring dealers, running from the police, and engaging in all sorts of other petty crimes that can make for a fun night of gaming. Developer TVGS released Schedule 1 into early access on March 24, 2025, and almost 460,000 people were causing chaos in Highland Point by April 6th. The fact that Schedule 1 lost nearly 80% of those players a month later isn't that surprising. Inexpensive party games aren't known for having a particularly long lifespan, but thousands of players discovered that Schedule 1 is a lot deeper than its goofy premise implies. There are some surprisingly deep simulation mechanics and a solidly engaging factory upgrade system hiding under the surface. Even better, TVGS has a detailed roadmap of content it wants to add over the course of the planned 2-year early access period. Schedule 1 is one of those games that's going to keep chugging along, even if almost everyone who was there at the start is gone. Going through this list, we've been using the phrase lost their entire player base a little metaphorically. Games can lose 90% or more of their players without disappearing completely, but here's a game that actually lost all of its players in 2025. Multiversus was a free-to-play fighting game that could be summed up as Super Smash Bros., but featuring the expansive roster of IPs belonging to Warner Bros. Studios. The game launched in May 2024 to mixed reviews, and its peak player count on Steam was just over 150,000. In January 2025, developer Player First Games announced that it will be taking Multiversus offline at the end of May. Technically, the game is still playable offline, but if you're just discovering that now, it's already too late. Players needed to log in during the 5th and final season to create a local save file. According to SteamDB, a few dozen people just did that. But for the rest of the world, even people who previously spent money in the game, Multiversus doesn't exist anymore.
You realize, of course, this means war!
The death of Multiverse and other games like XDefiant has sparked a ton of conversations online. Streamer Pirate Software lost 90% of its viewers after criticizing a movement called Stop Killing Games. So clearly players don't like seeing games vanish. Games that lose their entire player base are still parts of gaming history, and a huge portion of the community wants to keep these titles alive, even if no one's playing.